Today, we're diving into what daily life was like in ancient Mesopotamia. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wasn't Mesopotamia just one big civilization like Rome or Greece? Actually, it wasn't. Mesopotamia was a mix of different ethnicities and kingdoms, each with its own unique traits. From around 4500 BCE to the fall of Sumer in 1750 BCE, people in Mesopotamia lived in ways that were quite similar across the region. They really valued writing, which started around 3600 to 3000 BCE. Once they got the hang of it, their scribes went all out, recording almost every detail of city life. Thanks to their efforts, archaeologists and scholars today have a pretty good grasp of how these ancient folks lived and worked. You might have heard the quote by Thornton Wilder that says, "Babylon once had 2 million people in it, and all we know about them is the names of the kings and some copies of wheat contracts and the sales of slaves." That's from his play, Our Town. While Wilder was writing fiction and didn't have all the facts, we actually know much more about Mesopotamian life than just the names of kings and slave transactions. Let's talk about the population and social classes. Cities in Mesopotamia varied a lot in size. For instance, around 2300 BCE, Uruk had about 50,000 people, while Mari had 10,000 and Akkad had 36,000. These populations were divided into hierarchical social classes: the king and nobility, priests and priestesses, the upper class, the lower class, and slaves. The king was seen as having a special connection with the gods, acting as a bridge between the divine and earthly realms. The success of his kingdom was thought to reflect the gods' favor. It was the king's duty to care for his people, while the high priest or priestess took care of the city's god. A successful king, one who expanded his kingdom and brought prosperity, was seen as favored by the gods. The priests ensured the gods knew about the king's achievements and sought their blessings. Even though many regions often rebelled against Sargon of Akkad and his dynasty, he became legendary due to his military conquests and the vastness of his empire. This success indicated that the gods, especially Inanna in his case, were on his side. High priests or priestesses served the city's main god and handled important rituals, while lesser priests managed daily religious activities and served as healers, being the first doctors and dentists in Mesopotamia. And one of the most famous priestesses was Indiana, the daughter of Sargon of Akkad. She lived around 2285 to 2250 BCE and served as the high priestess at Ur. Indiana is also known as the world's first author whose name is recorded. Her days were spent managing temple affairs, overseeing the surrounding complex, and leading ceremonies. Unlike other priestesses, she didn't serve as a healer. The upper class included various professionals such as merchants, scribes, private tutors, and high-ranking military officers. Merchants who owned their own businesses and didn't need to travel enjoyed a leisurely life, often spending time with friends and drinking the best beer, attended by slaves. Scribes were highly respected and worked in courts, temples, and schools. Every teacher was a scribe, and writing was a crucial subject in Mesopotamian schools. However, only boys attended these schools, as women, despite having nearly equal rights, were still not considered capable of mastering literacy. This belief persisted even after Indiana's notable career. Private tutors were also highly regarded and well paid by wealthy families to help their sons excel in school. Tutors not affiliated with a school, often run by the temple, were seen as exceptionally intelligent and virtuous. They dedicated themselves to their students and, if employed by a wealthy client, enjoyed a lifestyle almost as luxurious as their employers. The lower class comprised various essential occupations that kept the city running, such as farmers, artists, musicians, construction workers, canal builders, bakers, and many more. Some professions like prostitutes, perfume makers, jewelry makers, and goldsmiths could elevate a person to the upper class if they had exceptional skills or the favor of a wealthy patron or the king. Interestingly, lower-class individuals could climb the social ladder. For instance, the town of Kish was once ruled by a queen named Kubaba, a former tavern keeper. Women were primarily in lower-class jobs but could hold esteemed positions similar to men. They were the first brewers, tavern keepers, doctors, and dentists before these professions became lucrative and were taken over by men. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the slaves. People became slaves through various means, such as being captured in war, selling themselves to pay off a debt, being sold as punishment for a crime, being kidnapped and sold, or being sold by family members to relieve debt. Slaves didn't belong to any single ethnicity and weren't limited to manual labor. They managed households, estates, tutored children, tended horses, served as accountants, and worked as skilled artisans. If a slave worked diligently, they could eventually buy their freedom. And now let's take a closer look at their homes and furnishings. The king and his court lived in the grand palace and its surrounding complex. In the cities, homes were built outward from the center, which was the temple and its impressive ziggurat. Priests lived near the temple complex, while the wealthiest people lived closest to this center. These central structures, like the ziggurat, temple, and palace, were made of durable, oven-baked bricks and were brightly painted. In contrast, the homes of the affluent were made of sun-dried bricks, and those of the less wealthy were built from reeds. Slaves lived either in their masters' homes or in nearby reed houses. Now, these reed houses were far from the simple huts you might imagine. Historian Bertman describes their construction. Tall marsh plants were uprooted, tied into tight bundles, and placed in holes dug into the ground. These bundles were then bent over and tied together at the top to form archways. Additional bundles were joined to create walls, and reed mats were used to cover the roof or act as doors. For brick homes, clay from riverbanks was mixed with straw and packed into wooden molds to make bricks. These bricks dried in the sun before being used in construction. While sun-dried bricks were prone to weather damage, oven-baked bricks were more durable but expensive, so they were reserved for the homes of the rich and for religious buildings. Inside the homes, light came from small sesame oil lamps or, in wealthier homes, from windows with wooden grills. Brick homes were often whitewashed to reflect heat, and doors were painted bright red to ward off evil spirits. To combat the intense heat from May to September, homes needed to provide effective shelter. During the cooler, rainy season, homes were heated with palm fronds or wood. Palaces and temples had ornate braziers for heating, while lower-class homes used clay-lined pits. Indoor plumbing was quite advanced, with toilets in separate rooms and tiled drains leading to cesspools or sewer systems. However, the construction quality of these homes was sometimes questionable. Ancient laws, such as those in the Code of Hammurabi, held builders accountable for any structural failures that resulted in injury or death. Homes were furnished with chairs, tables, beds, and kitchenware similar to what we use today. In affluent homes, beds had wooden frames with rope or reed bases, covered by mattresses stuffed with wool or goat hair, and adorned with linen sheets. These beds were often intricately carved and sometimes inlaid with precious metals. Lower-class families slept on mats of woven straw or reeds laid directly on the floor. Tables, in wealthier homes, were covered with linen tablecloths and napkins, and families gathered around them for meals just like we do today. Just like today, Mesopotamian families consisted of a mother, father, children, and extended family members. Both men and women worked, and children's lives were shaped by their gender and social status. Boys from upper-class families went to school, while their sisters stayed home to learn domestic skills. Sons of lower-class families followed their fathers into their trades, while daughters learned their mothers' roles. Children's toys were surprisingly similar to those today. Infants and toddlers had terracotta rattles filled with pellets. Boys played with slingshots, bows and arrows, and boomerangs, while girls had dolls and miniature furniture for playing house. Both boys and girls enjoyed toy ships, chariots, animals, and wagons, letting their imaginations roam. They also played with balls, hoops, and a jump rope game intriguingly named after the love goddess Ishtar. Families enjoyed board games, much like parcheesi, and dice games. Images show families at leisure, much like modern family photos. Sports were popular, especially wrestling and boxing among the lower classes, and hunting among the nobility. The family meal was a central part of daily life, similar to today, but the entertainment was different. Storytelling and music were key parts of the evening. In poorer homes, a family member would play an instrument, sing, or tell a story after dinner. Wealthier families had slaves or hired professional entertainers. They played instruments familiar to us today: drums, bells, castanets, sistrums, rattles, recorders, flutes, horns, panpipes, lyres, and harps. Music was a beloved part of Mesopotamian life. One queen of yore even took her musicians to the afterworld with her, using a sleeping potion in her tomb. People listened to music while drinking beer, reading, or relaxing at home or in their gardens. Music was integral to banquets and private meals, especially for the wealthy. Images and inscriptions from the time revealed just how important music was. A shepherd might be shown playing his flute with his dog listening intently. Music added a rich, vibrant layer to daily life in ancient Mesopotamia, connecting people across generations and social classes. And now let's delve into the food and clothing of ancient Mesopotamia. Barley was the staple grain crop of Mesopotamia, and from it, the Mesopotamians were the first to brew beer. Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, was celebrated with hymns, one of which doubles as the world's oldest beer recipe from around 1800 BCE. Beer likely originated from fermented barley bread. In addition to barley, their diet included a variety of fruits like apples, cherries, figs, and dates, as well as vegetables such as lettuce, cucumbers, and beans. They supplemented these with fish from rivers, livestock like goats and sheep, and hunted game such as deer and gazelle. Mesopotamians also kept geese and ducks for eggs. Their meals were seasoned with oils like sesame and mineral products such as salt. Despite extensive trade networks, they primarily relied on local ingredients. Beer, highly valued, sometimes served as a substantial part of their midday meal. Before eating, they offered prayers of gratitude to their gods, as religion was deeply integrated into daily life. Clothing in Mesopotamia varied by social status. Wool and linen were common fabrics, with linen reserved for finer garments. Cotton and silk were introduced later by Assyrians and Romans, respectively. Men typically wore long robes or pleated skirts made from goatskin or sheepskin, while women wore one-piece tunics of wool or linen. Soldiers stood out with their hooded capes, and older men favored ankle-length robes. Women's attire featured more diverse patterns compared to men's generally monotone robes. Both men and women used cosmetics and perfumes. They adorned their eyes with early forms of mascara and applied perfumes made from aromatic plants steeped in water and blended with oils. These scents were highly prized and could elevate a perfume maker's status significantly. In conclusion, the daily life of ancient Mesopotamians bears remarkable similarities to our lives today. They cherished their families, worked in various professions, and found leisure in music, games, and storytelling. Despite technological advancements, human needs and desires have remained fundamentally unchanged over millennia, as evidenced by the archaeological records of Mesopotamia.